hope you're feeling groovy as we're about to review another movie. All right. Thank
Recording
you.
in progress.
Thank you so much, Cole, aka the ugliest person in the world, for finally coming on. And it's been very difficult getting you to come on.
Yeah, it has. Life's been very busy. I'm glad to be on the show.
Yeah, I'm so happy too. It's been challenging for sure. And I know you've been busy, so I'm very grateful to have guests on, especially you. So thank you.
Yeah, I'm excited. This is great.
Yeah, people listening, you probably want to know that we're going to be reviewing the Blair Witch Project.
Yeah, that's true. The 1999 Blair Witch movie, by the way.
Heard.
Not the new one.
Well, the new one's just called Blair Witch. That's why I said Blair Witch Project. But you're right. 1999, 19. So,
well, for all I know, there was another remake in there somewhere.
Well, actually, in 1999, they had also made a documentary, but that's kind of interesting. We can talk about that later. For people listening, they probably don't know that I named this because you told me to name it Faithful Film Fanatic. So,
Yeah, that's true.
I am curious, what about that name was so, what made you think of it?
Well, I was playing video games, so I was half paying attention. Let's be honest. But what gave me the idea? Was yeah, that's true. So faithful. I'd come up with that because you're pretty faithful to most things you do, whether it's film or your friends or your family. You're a very faithful person, and your faith religiously as well. So all that put together came with the word faithful. And you had film, which also started with an F, and you love film, obviously, and then fanatic because you're fanatical about it. I mean, you always used to come over to my house with buttloads of movies and too many to choose from, and you were practically swimming with movies in your house. So
yeah, I don't have the massive film collection that I used to have. I missed that, and I would like to grow that. But it's like now that I have bills, I almost feel guilty spending money on a movie, even though part of me wants to.
Shouldn't you feel guilty for not buying movies?
Yeah, but not as guilty as I did that day when I caused all those shelves at Game Exchange to fall down.
Hey, that was the ghost from the hotel, okay? We're not going to blame you.
Dude, that was a weird day.
Yeah, that's for the Halloween vibes. We visited the most haunted hotel in Arkansas.
For you guys that
live there.
For you guys that aren't familiar with that, I do live in Eureka Springs, Arkansas, which is a tourist town in Arkansas. And anyway, there's a hotel in Eureka Springs that is advertised and known to be the most haunted hotel in Arkansas. It's called the Crescent Hotel, and I think it's said to be one of the most haunted in the country, but don't hold me onto that.
Yeah, me neither. I didn't research it. I just took his word for it. The Blair Witch Project has inspired me that we need to rent the most dreadful haunted room in the Crescent Motel and do found footage at night.
If you want to, we could do that. But we're gonna have to split the. We're gonna split the bill 50-50 because they charge like $200-300 a night.
Oh, really? Yeah, no surprise there. So we get to pay money to be haunted.
But
maybe we should just do it in somewhere else.
But that was one thing I kept thinking about as I was watching this film. Regardless of how I feel about this movie, regardless how you felt about this movie, it did seem like one of those films that was more for the filmmakers, more for the people involved in it than it really was to make that film. And I felt like the people involved in this film had lots of fun. And when this film came out in 1999, people were so thrilled they created their own Blair Witch projects in their woods that they had in the backyard. Some people went as far as going
Mhm.
to Maryland, where this movie was supposed to take place. And so,
Right.
just for fun, if me and you were to do something like this, who would be the
Mhm.
third person?
Uh, um, does it have to be a woman?
Well, if it was going to be a woman, and it was going to have to be
Do what?
related to, and it was going to have to be like Heather, I already know what woman that would be, and I don't want to say something bad about somebody. So it doesn't have to be a woman, but
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure you know who I'm thinking
that's
of.
true. They might even have the first starting letter of their name, but I might be thinking of somebody else.
Well, the first letter is L. That's who I'm thinking of. It's Mrs. Let's go to
Oh, yeah, yeah,
Subway.
yeah, yeah.
Says that it says
Yeah,
that they're
yeah,
okay
yeah.
eating anywhere in the world,
Anything,
and
as long as
all
it's Subway.
and all I wanted was not to eat at Subway, and that's all she wanted. But she never said it. She said she'd eat anything in the world, but 50 names later, no, no, no. Want to mention the Subway? Yes. Why didn't you just say something?
Right, yeah.
So,
Yep.
did you, in your mind, did you have a third person that would be the trio? Because I couldn't think of a third person. I just kept thinking of you and me and just like a blank person.
Well, I honestly see that's the same thing. If it's a woman, then no, I have no idea. But I have a couple ideas who could be the third guy,
Who would be
which
the
is
third
one dude
guy?
from my work. Uh, this guy from my work, he's absolutely obsessed with haunted stuff. And, he does a whole bunch of stuff on it. He has like a whole blog.
Well, it might be interesting one time day if I ever do want to do a Halloween film, maybe to do something like this. Just
Mhm.
because it'd be fun, not necessarily, maybe try to make it scarier. That was one thing I had a problem with the movie was
Mhm.
the movie itself is not scary. If you go into it believing that it is
Mhm.
real, I can see how some fear gets
Mhm.
set there. And I think that that's the difference from watching this movie in 1999 versus watching it in 2022. Because the way this film
Yeah.
was promoted, advertised, this film was made to look like something it wasn't.
Yeah, that's true. It did a great job of creating an atmosphere of horror and had suspension or suspense, and just it kind of built up over time. It was never really scary for me, at least.
I'm curious, you said that. What parts of the movie did you think were so suspenseful?
Well, it wasn't about the horror. It was more about the characters' relationships and how they continuously to get more tense and more, they got angry at each other more and more, and it built a tension between them, which is where the terror is, just how freaked out they are, at least from watching it, for me
Right.
at least.
Okay, so
But I've
you,
seen lots of horror movies. I'm not easily scared.
but see, that's the thing though. It's like this movie, you going into it, it's advertised to be the scariest movie of the year or whatever. And I would have to say, in my personal opinion, The Sixth Sense is way scarier than this movie.
Yeah, I would second you with that for sure.
So
but you had more to play with than that. This movie literally just had people running around with cameras. You never actually saw anything except for some rocks and some blood.
But see,
and the shaking tent.
That was one part of the movie. I mean, the shaky cam does get kind of annoying. I'm not the biggest fan of shaky cam, but the thing I
It's the
like,
nature found footage, though.
the thing that I did like about the film Blair Witch Project was the imagination. That's the thing that I loved so much about Alfred Hitchcock was when he did Psycho.
I've seen a few of his films. That was excellent.
When he did Psycho, there were things in it that you never saw. You just imagined it. He found a way to write, direct a movie, and kind of play it in your head. I feel like this movie was trying to do that in certain ways, but because of the budget and because of how it was done, it failed to a certain extent. But I do feel like that was the direction it was trying to go for.
Well, hey, the fact that that they were at that time not super duper experienced, they were starting out. It does seem to me that they did a pretty good job if we're sitting here comparing them to Alfred Hitchcock already, even if it's a fair comparison.
Yeah,
I mean, you got to think about what they had. They didn't have much. They weren't, I mean, their acting was very good, in my opinion. I was convinced.
Yeah, I mean, their acting was good, but put aside the acting, just the film itself, it's just doesn't it feel like it's only you can only enjoy it if you have this false belief of what the film is going into.
Well, maybe, but I personally enjoyed it just because of appreciating where it came from and seeing these people make this work, because it was very character driven. You had every decision the girl was making, even if they were bad decisions, and she was absolutely awful, but that was her character.
I have to say right now that I would never want to work with Heather on anything.
Well, it's funny that you say that because that's the actual actress that you're talking about too, because that's her actual name. So you wouldn't work with her either?
I wouldn't work with that character.
Yeah, that's true. But that character is her.
Honestly, though, I don't necessarily. I do. They said on IMDb, from what I read, that the only really time or scene in the film where these actors aren't acting, they are truly themselves, is in the scene where they're at the hotel and they're drunk and doing whatever.
No, I thoroughly enjoyed it, but it was still not. I mean, I've seen a lot of horror movies, especially supernatural ones that involve like witches, demonic power, all that stuff. This one's certainly not near the top of the list at all.
I'd say,
but it's still decent for what it was, and I enjoyed it.
Yeah. What I know that they have such a small budget, and you have to give people credit for putting a film together because it's a lot of work, and you see people either succeeding or failing at all the time. And so the fact that you carry through it and not give up shows a lot of character. And I'm sure the people that made this probably learned a lot after they made it. I don't know if they did. I don't know if the filmmakers did any films after this. I know the actors did. I don't know about the filmmakers, but it just wasn't. I don't know. It just did not feel.
I've been hearing about this movie for years. Okay, I've been hearing about it for years. It's like it's great. It's fantastic. And then when I watched it, I feel like the only thing that was truly fantastic was the atmosphere that it established.
Yeah, I mean, I'd have to agree. I mean, the atmosphere is good, but every- I mean, I'm impressed that there was no written dialogue, and so for that, I gotta give props. Everything was
Yeah.
improvised, and so that's really
And
good.
it felt very natural. It felt like just watching a movie that had a script.
Right. And so that in itself, you gotta give the people that made this props and
Mm.
congratulations. But on the same flip side of that same coin, at the end of the day, if you're looking at it from the movie, that it is it's still not that it's not that it's a movie that depends on you to have a false perception of it before you can actually enjoy it. If you go
Mm.
into it knowing that it's BS and it's spending all this time trying to convince you that it's real, you're never going to buy into the fear.
Well, I never really have ever bought into really any movie personally, but I still feel like Blair Witch and the Blair Witch Project was very, what can I say? I think that it was believable for what they put forth. I felt like their interactions were believable. I felt like how they were going crazy was believable, and I believed uh, some of the things. Now, I do think that them opening the tent every night, they knew that if they did that, I mean, they knew this stuff was bad, but they opened the tent anyway. And they went into the house at the end of the movie. It's like, not to go into the house. Seriously.
And it's like every horror movie has to have those stupid little cliches. Like
Yeah.
Cabin in the Woods, for an example.
Yeah. Cabin in the Woods for sure. That's
I mean, I know that Cabin in the Woods was not that great of a film. I mean, I didn't enjoy it either, but I do think that it did get what it wanted across more effective than the Blair Witch Project. I mean, just like you, I've been hearing about this movie and I was kind of excited to watch it tonight. And I'm not going to lie, after I watched it, I kind of wish I had gone with my second pick.
what was your second?
Candyman.
Yeah, we should have watched that. I mean, I told you I watched the remake of Blair Witch and I didn't like it any more than this one.
But is
I
the
don't like
original
the concept of
the originals are always better, I thought. I mean,
Well,
most of
they're
the time.
honestly, it still is better.
But I have to agree with you. The concept of it is not that intriguing to me.
No.
And
Yeah.
I was intrigued by it because of things I've heard about it. And it's like you going to watch it, you don't hear anything. There's nothing else. All you've heard about is all there is. There's nothing extra. It's like, okay, cool. That guy was right. That's exciting. That's exciting. Oh, that's the rest of the movie. Okay. That's how I feel going into it.
I felt a lot of resemblance between that movie that we just watched and another one that I talked to you about the other day called The Forest. And I felt like they both had similar things going on, but The Forest was much better about doing the things it was doing. It accomplished its goal, in my opinion. Whereas this movie, it depends on what they're looking for. Because if they're looking to scare people, well, they did scare the people who believed it, and they didn't scare the people who didn't believe it.
But see,
if their goal was to make you feel for the characters, well, they did that. I mean, I felt for them.
See, that's my thing was I didn't really feel for the characters. I didn't really connect with them. I mean, yes, they're these three filmmakers, but when the film starts out, I have no reason to take an interest or like any of these characters. And I didn't even understand how did they Like, did it? I don't. Did the beginning of the movie even tell you if Heather and Josh were friends before? Because it kind of felt like all three people were complete strangers wanting to make a movie together.
Yeah,
That's
see,
the
that's
vibe
what
I
I
got.
gathered is there. I mean, I thought they were just like classmates or something. That's honestly how I took it. Is like they were put together on a project,
But whenever
but they
they
didn't
went,
know each other very well.
yeah, whenever they went to go pick up Mike, he almost seemed kind of puzzled. And then it's like when he realized it was them, like, oh, okay. It's like, so regardless of what it was, they did not know each other well. It's not like me and you making a movie or whatever. Like these people weren't that
And
close.
that's why they were yelling and screaming at each other, not trusting each other. And that's kind of why that worked the way it did. If they knew each other very well, I wouldn't have believed their reactions towards each other.
Okay. That's interesting that you say that because originally, according to IMDb, which I thought this was kind of silly to even them think about it, but apparently Heather and Josh were originally going to be lovers.
You know, I kind of got that vibe for like a second at the start of the movie, but it kind of fell off because then he said, "Oh, well, my girlfriend." I'm like, "Oh." So
Yeah. You know what's interesting is the actor that played Josh and the actress that played Heather. I guess it's still Heather and Josh. They,
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
they were the ones that got the most arguments, the most distrust,
Mhm.
and I I don't think they got along with each other very well, and that is the reason why Josh was killed off in the movie. If you have not seen
Yeah.
this, if you have not seen the Blair Witch Project, I do apologize. I just spoiled the very ending.
Yeah. Well, everybody dies. Oops.
it I did like how the ending did kind of resemble or go back and foreshadow what that lady said when they were interviewing people at the beginning of the
Yeah.
film. And
Yeah.
from what I read, that was, I forget the serial killer's name, but that was actually inspired by a real serial killer.
Yeah. That does not surprise me. I didn't read into that, so I didn't know that. But that's cool though.
I don't get that concept though. I mean, if you're gonna kill somebody, don't you want them to be shaking in fear? Like, how is them? I mean, don't get me wrong. If you were killing somebody and I was in the corner, I'd still be fearful. But I just feel like I'd be more fearful if you made me watch whoever you killed. I mean, so I don't get it. It just seems more fearful if you are forced
Well,
to
we
watch.
never actually got to figure out if it was a witch indeed, or we never really know what actually did it. For all we know, it's a serial killer.
That's true, but
But all the crazy stuff that happened outside of that, forest kind of changing and stuff to where they couldn't leave, it was pretty witchcrafty.
yeah, but the idea of you killing somebody, anybody,
Mm-hmm.
and the other person that you have not yet killed is in that corner, and then you kill them next. What's like? I'm just trying to understand the logic behind that because
Well, in some cases, it could be a twisted killer with a mind for sympathy, a sense of sympathy. We don't want them to experience this, but we still need to kill them.
see that
We don't
that
want them
does
to see.
see that doesn't make sense to me because it's like if I was a killer Which
That movie
disclaimer,
don't make
I'm
sense to me
not.
either.
I'm not a killer, but if I was, I feel like I would want every ounce of fear from that person. I mean, isn't that what a killer wants, is to torture you and make you and watch and like get laughter out of your fear and struggles? And it's like you're in a corner, like what's so fearful and ugly of that? And maybe I'm thinking too much about that part. That's just something I didn't get in the movie. And if it was based off of a real serial killer or if it was all baloney, I didn't understand that either.
Yeah, it definitely left some questions more than it definitely left more questions than it answered. How
And
is it they were out there? Did you just randomly hear the airplanes flying overhead and thinking these kids really should just wave them down or start a fire because there's an airplane every 5 minutes in the background? I mean, they couldn't help where they were shooting, but I heard the airplanes all the time, and I wanted them to at least try to get their attention.
dude, that's crazy. I was watching this movie like almost 2 minutes pause, 3 minutes pause, 1.5 minute pause, 5 minutes pause, something like that. And I don't really recall hearing airplanes. That's funny though, you said
Yeah,
that. But
yeah. I think they were trying to ignore it so you wouldn't notice.
okay.
But honestly, I mean, that's kind of impossible to avoid if you're shooting a film. I mean, if an airplane flies over, what are you going to do?
That's fair. That's fair. And you know, I admire the marketing that went behind this movie more than I do the actual movie.
Oh, yeah, it was a whole prank. It's like a big setup. It's a big deal.
So, did you overall enjoy the movie? Like,
I
what
did, yeah. I
you
enjoyed
did?
it. I did enjoy it. I certainly didn't. I certainly wasn't bored. And, I enjoyed it. I can tell you didn't like it that much. I mean, I didn't like it that much either, but I can tell you didn't enjoy it. You wish you'd been doing something else. And, if there was another horror movie to watch, I had a few that I would have chosen over it too. But I enjoyed it.
I mean, I did give you that option, by the way, to pick a
That's
movie.
true. I'd heard so many good things. I wanted to give it a shot.
I wanted to like this movie so much, but it's hard to like something for me when it's so much dependent on another factor. And it's like that factor is not irrelevant. Like you watch certain movies in a certain time period. It's like if you watch a 1980s movie that is just something that people from the 80s would understand. If you watch it in the 1990s or early 2000s, you're not going to understand it. It didn't go well with time. And this movie, I just don't think it aged well. I could not, I could
Mm-hmm.
not appreciate it. I tried to, but I just couldn't appreciate it
I
by
mean, I
itself.
appreciated details, but I don't know. I liked it, but not a lot.
So I'm confused. You didn't like it. You liked it. You liked it. You liked it not a lot. Like, what does that
Okay,
mean?
the reason what it means is there were parts of it that I did like, and there were other parts that I didn't. But overall, I enjoyed it. I liked it, but not that much.
So,
Does that make sense?
not
It's
really.
like a no. Okay. I mean, you got to also understand, considering that I've watched a lot of horror movies, you haven't yet, I don't think. A lot of horror movies have terrible plots, and there's not much competition when it comes to horror movies because generally their plots are not always super fantastic. Then you have the standout ones, but a lot of them are just about the characters and what they experience, what they go through, and then there's the end. I watched this movie Barbarian that just came out in the theater, and it was so simple, and it was kind of disappointing. But the atmosphere was good.
Regardless if a movie is horror or not, has characters or not, it's hard for me to be invested in the story where it doesn't feel like the story's investing in itself.
Mm-hmm. I felt like there was a lot of investment from the people who made it and all that. But, no, it's hard to say. Like Mike, for example, his character was very unreliable. He was 1 second thought he was going to be the one to go crazy because he went crazy first, and all of a sudden he's the nice guy that's all calm and stuff and telling everybody to be calm. And 2 seconds later, he's screaming at everybody, and everybody's screaming at him because apparently he threw away the map.
See, that I don't like Matt. We're on this journey. He gets mad at Heather for losing the map, goes crazy. And then it's like less than 10 minutes later, oh, hey guys, by the way, I threw the map away. I didn't think there's a reason to have it, just adding that.
I was surprised Josh didn't say that he threw it away next. I mean, let's be honest. The Blair Witch probably got rid of it. You should have went with that. That would have been a lot better than him just kicking it in the water.
If they would have gone that direction, it would have brought a little bit more comical relief. But that one example, I'm glad you mentioned it because I was a little blank for a second. But that was one of the examples that I was trying to get at was you have these characters. You have these characters. I'm glad I have your permission to talk.
Sorry.
Thank you. I'm glad I got your blessing. May I continue?
You may continue, sir. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes. Go ahead, Michael.
So, what I was trying to get at was that was one.
We have 2 minutes, by the way.
I know, and when this 2 minutes is up, I'll have to send you another invite. So.
Okay.
All right. So what I was having a problem with the film were the characters, the way they were set up, the way they were built, and it's not believable, realistic, or any way with Mike's character, for example. The only reason Mike's character is the way it is because there was tension and drama between Heather and Josh. And so I assume I wasn't on the film set, obviously, but I imagine in my head, because of the tension between the two, they're like, okay, all right. Even though this whole entire film's been trying to make Mike the bad guy and get him killed off, last minute we're going to reverse it so that way you don't have to deal with Josh anymore. Josh, you're wanting to go to that concert, right? Well, consider yourself free to go. Like that's what I imagine because like it even said in IMDb that Josh was thrilled to be cut from the end of the film because he had a concert he wanted to go to. So
yeah, I saw that too.
So it's like I feel like it made the film suffer, and it's like I can't take these characters seriously. I had a hard enough time taking them seriously, and then the entire switch of Mike and Mike did not make sense. I mean,
yeah, it gets even worse. The loopholes get worse, man. When he talked about kicking it into the river or into the creek, this was before they even came to the creek. They came to the creek after that happened.
I I didn't even look at that little bit of detail, but I believe
All the improvisation is what caused those loopholes.
All right, see, so a second ago when this first started, we were saying how great the improv was, but now that
Well,
we're
the
talking,
characters talking back and forth, they were, but the hazards that come with improvisation are just it just comes with it. They still did a good. So as I was saying before, I was interrupted.
rude computer, rude.
The characters in the improvisation thing, yes, I thought that they did very well playing off of each other. Like if one was angry and started yelling, the other one went right back at him, very believably. But overall, it caused problems with loopholes in the story because they they were just going with what they had. They didn't have nothing really. They just went with their gut.
But you got to think though, if most of the energy of these characters in that film are always angry, always negative, then doesn't that in itself create a loophole on these characters? Because you got to think, even Old Man Jones, who's a very grumpy old man, is not necessarily grumpy 24/7. He's grumpy when he sees those filthy kids jumping on his grass. But whenever he's home alone drinking that of his, he's as happy as a clam.
Well, and they did attempt that with this movie. You'll notice that every night when they get in the tent right beforehand, they say they're sorry for all their fights. And then they make some joke about food or something like that. And then everything is good for a brief moment. And then everything goes to chaos again when they open the stupid tent again.
Hey, that did not go well.
It didn't work.
That was not believable.
Like so we're sitting here watching all this horrific stuff or supposedly that's supposed to be happening, and now somebody wants to talk about ice cream and cheeseburgers.
And
I know they're hungry, but
all right, what was that? Is that your dad?
No. That was the signal breaking.
Okay. The thing I had a problem with one of the problems I had with the film was if this was supposed to be realistic, right? Because if you're going to try to convince people that this movie is real, you're going to want it to be as realistic as possible. Why didn't the characters ever look for food, try to make their own food? Why didn't they ever hunt for food? I mean, the idea is that they've been in these woods for days and days and days, and all I see is Mike and his little tree thing eating a leaf.
Number one, they didn't seem like people that would know how to do any of that. Second of all, they didn't really have the budget to have a hunting sequence.
Oh, I get okay, but to ignore it completely just doesn't seem.
I mean, they didn't completely ignore it. I can't remember who said it, but one of them said, "We have lots of stuff to do, guys. We got to get food and shelter and stuff." Like one of them said that, and then it was just completely blown off, like it was.
Yeah, cool. Because they, by that,
because they're going to get out in the next 2 hours, right? Why do we need to go to all that trouble if we're going to be out of the woods in 2 hours?
What I don't get is after being with Heather for 2 days, just the first 2 days, why does she get to have the map? Why is she in charge of the map? I mean, what's the thinking behind that? That's like giving me the map. That's like you trusting me to give you directions. How to
the funniest part is that she was the most consistent character writing anyway. Whatever they called it, since they didn't really write much, she was the most consistent.
I would agree with you on that.
And at the end, before she died, she apologized for everything that she did, realizing that she made tons of mistakes.
So in a way, if you really think about it, even though the film says these three filmmakers, she is the main character. The other two boys are just side
Yeah.
characters.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess if you went into it thinking that way, you wouldn't have so much negative things about the characters going on through the film. Because if you watched a said movie, you're not going to really focus on the side characters like you would with the main characters. But because it focused so much and emphasizes on three, going into it, you're thinking that all three characters have equal roles to play.
And they do get equal amounts of screen time. In fact, we actually see Heather the least because she's always behind the camera, but somehow she's the main character, but we see the least of her. We just hear her a lot.
So
we don't see her as often as the other two.
I'm just curious. It's like the other two, you think that their characters were very affected in their character growth by the way the filmmakers of the actual film, not these pretend filmmakers, but the actual people that made this film, pulled the plug last minute and chose to have Josh off the film due to some drama on set? You feel like that created loopholes in itself? You think it was the best decision?
It, I don't. They had to do what they had to do, so I can't. If something had to change, it had to change, and they worked with what they worked with, and they were fairly successful, regardless of how we look at it years later.
That's a fair point. I mean,
they made a lot more money on their film than I did on mine.
Right. And us talking about it is one thing versus them actually doing it. So, I get that. And us talking about it's not going to change.
I would have been very pleased. I would have been very pleased if any of the films I was a part of in college were half as good as the movie we just watched. Like, it was tons better than any of the films I was a part of in college. Now, granted, some of the story ideas were better in college, but they weren't executed as well. And the acting wasn't as good.
Didn't you do a movie in school?
I did, but the films that I did were without characters. They were experimental films. As far as what I did, just because I didn't have the time to cast and all that stuff. With all the other things I had, but
all I remember of the film you did was the apocalyptic one with music in the background. That's the only one I remember. And then the one that me and you started, but you had to scrap last minute. So what other ones did you do?
Well, I actually had a part 1 and a part 2 of the apocalyptic vibe. And then I had a third one the next year that kind of played off of those two, but had a different tone. But they were all experimental because it was about atmosphere. It wasn't about plot. It's about environmental storytelling.
And so because of that's obviously something very important to you. And I know that people listening to us don't know you as well as I do, but whenever I read your writing, the details you put into environment, a lot more details than I do. Because whenever I'm writing, I want the characters to tell me what environment we're in, whereas you allow the environment be first and the characters react off the environment, which is far different from the way I write. And so
nowadays, it's not even my job to tell a story.
What do you mean by that?
What I mean is as a writer, I'm not a storyteller. I am a character creator and a world maker. And I put them together, and then the characters tell the story in the world they inhabit. All I do is create them and the world for them to exist in, and a place for them to move around. They tell the story, I don't.
But I feel like when you're writing a story, you are the location is telling the story. You just have these characters kind of re-saying it. Is
Yeah.
that, is that making sense?
Well, yeah, the world kind of gives, tells the story, and the characters have to deal with whatever the world throws at them.
Right. Which is
The world is God, and the characters are just trying to survive God.
which you could agree is way different than my writing style.
Well, yeah, the writing style is, a lot. It's got a lot of funny humor in it, and the characters and their interactions together are different than my characters. A lot
So,
of times, my stories are definitely character versus world, and your characters are character versus themselves.
and the Blair Witch Project, I felt like it was trying to do character versus world. If they
It was
had,
trying to do both, actually.
but that didn't click with me. That did not click
No.
with me. I feel like I hate saying this because, I see people be able to do the impossible. I was part of this film festival that you know of, and that's based in Florida. And this guy that lives in Florida was able to make a featured film with $27,000, and it had good acting, good story. You watch it on the surface, you would never realize that it's $27,000. It looked like a movie that you watched off of Hallmark Channel, or a movie like that. Like, it's not a super high budget film, but you did not think it was that low. And so it's
Yeah.
like, it's hard for me because I watch so many films from different independent filmmakers. Or at least I have here more lately than I have ever have before. And I know that a movie's hard to make. And I know just the fact that you made a movie is accomplishment in itself. I get that. But at the end of the day, your movie is going to be judged or critiqued or reviewed or whatever you want it to be called by the quality of the movie that you did. Just like if I put a bad episode of my show on YouTube, which I have several times before, that's going to draw out traffic. They say that a bad episode is going to, I'm going to have 5 good episodes before, you know. So it's, I understand that the people behind this Blair Witch Project were passionate about what they were doing. I understand that they were trying to tell a story, but it's hard for me to respect it as a story or as these characters when I have firsthand watched movies with more than more than half less than half this budget and was able to pull off a better story, be able to pull off better characters. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and horror movies are not super strong half the time in either of those two elements. That's why I like horror movies so much, is because a lot of people are scared easy, okay? They're scared easy and they believe anything they watch. So it's a horror movie. And all they're doing is paying to go get scared. They don't care the element of the storytelling. They don't care about the characters. They just want to get scared. And a lot of people who went to see that movie did.
And so long, I was scared to go see a horror movie for that reason. But I don't know why. But it's like the only
They're not scary at all.
The only horror movies that I've watched, and I don't even consider them horror, I consider them thrillers, which I guess is kind of the same thing. I don't really know what the difference between thriller and horror is. But Bloomhouse
they're special, dude, with their horror movies.
I mean, you look, before we were doing this, I was trying to get you on board with the Belko experiment because I really liked that movie. And we probably could have, and we could have done that, but for whatever reason, I decided to do something I hadn't watched, which is sometimes.
And I wanted to do something I hadn't watched either.
Yeah, but
I thought it would be fun for us to talk about
stuff. Yeah, I think it is fun because honestly, even though part of me been wanting to watch this movie, if we weren't going to do this tonight, I still wouldn't have watched it. So it was good for me.
I wouldn't have either.
So that part was good for me. It's like what you always said, that you have to have new experiences, maybe try new things out. But
yeah,
I know that the Belko experiment is nothing like the Blair Witch, but I do
in all the good ways.
But I do think that the environment is set up better. I do think the characters are set up better. I believe that the Belko experiment, to me, the reason why it is good as it is it's not so dependent on a specific factor. If you make a movie dependent on something, I think you're making it almost weaker.
Well, in my opinion, Blair Witch tried too much to not show anything because they didn't have money to. But besides that point, I mean, yes, sure, Alfred Hitchcock with Psycho, and he's making you imagine things, but he shows you quite a lot too. How would Psycho go if you never saw the killer ever?
You mean Norman Bates?
Right. What if you never saw him? He was just talked about, and the girl wandered around and stuff, and then things would fall over. It just wouldn't make any sense.
Right.
And that's kind of what Blair Witch suffers from, is it never showed the Blair Witch. But it never showed anything.
But you can say the same thing about The Village. The Village shows the monster, and from that point forward, the movie's weaker. It happens with a lot of movies. A lot of movies aren't able to make something scary, so they avoid showing it altogether, because a lot of times the ones that do show it, you're no longer scared. Because what Alfred Hitchcock always said, the fear you create in your head is more fearful than something I could ever produce or make. And what you said, you're not entirely wrong. But going back, when that movie came out, people talked about how violent it was, how scary it was, right? We watch it today. It's a good movie. It's really good, but it doesn't seem that violent or that scary. But
he created it.
Right. In your head. You're seeing stuff in your head that you're not able to see on the screen. Just like you're always telling me about the Transformer movies. Your nostalgia with Transformers, how you watch them, you get all this nostalgia, you're so excited, you go back and you realize that your head was telling you a better story. Now, whether or not that was the director's intention, but that did
help. If that was just my brain.
Right.
I mean, kids, they do that, and that's why they're so easy to please with movies, because they naturally they love everyone who comes on screen immediately, and they trust them and they love them like they've known them for years. And there's no need to justify anything, because the kids would just believe it if you say it.
That's funny that you said that, because for me as a kid, I was the complete opposite. I had this piece of paper that was this piece of paper I wrote, and it was the ultimate movie list. And I wanted to own every single movie on this list. And
Mhm.
there was so many movies written on it, it was small as handwriting, and it was so crumbled. I would carry it in my pocket. Anytime I would buy that movie, I'd check it off the list. And it was the same
Mhm.
thing if I was to watch a movie that didn't have somebody in it on that list, I wouldn't watch it. I remember having like a list of 32 or maybe 50 different actors. And if I was to watch a movie, it had to have one of those 50 actors in it. If it didn't, I wasn't going to watch it. I,
Yeah,
I
that's
remember
awesome.
I remember because there was a movie my dad was trying to get me to watch with Tom Hanks in it, and Tom Hanks wasn't on that list. So I got in an argument with my dad that I wasn't going to watch that movie. But for whatever, I want to say it was Forrest Gump, but I can't be for certain. But it was some Tom Hanks
Yeah,
movie.
yeah.
So it's funny. I don't know if that's good or bad, but it's, what you just said is complete opposite for me.
Well, it's good to be a standout. See, I'm still like that, like in some ways, because it's like the movie we watched tonight. As soon as the characters come on the screen, I can feel them and I understand them as people, even if they're not written right. And I feel for them as soon as they're on the screen.
But see, that's the thing that I struggle with, right? Is both
Mhm.
of us watch so many movies. I mean, I obviously watch way more movies
You
than
watch a
you
lot,
do.
a heck of a lot more. Yeah.
See, for me, the only type of movies that I can watch and not have to be one minded on is Christmas. And I don't know why that is. Maybe there's more to it than that. But it's like Christmas movies are meant to be cheesy. If it's cheesy, it's doing what it's meant to do. That's what people love about it. Okay,
Right.
so I'm not, I mean, I was for an example, I was trying to watch Home Alone, and I part of me was not enjoying it because it's like Kevin McAllister is so unrealistically smart as this 12-year-old kid, and these bad guys are so
Mhm.
stupid. Like I was like watching this as an adult, it's almost like it's kind of hard to watch. But I kept
Yeah.
remembering as a kid, I loved watching it because of that reason. And
Yeah, it was about the kid being smarter than the adults because it doesn't often happen. It was the point.
right. And what was interesting is Disney had done a Home Alone remake called Home Sweet Home
Mhm.
Alone that I had watched, where it took what I had just said about the original Home Alone out. So you have this normal 10-year-old kid, nothing special about him, and these burglars. Movie's not as good. And I was like, why was that? And so it's the same thing, I feel like. I mean, when you're watching a horror movie, at the end of the day, you're watching it to get scared. That's what you said earlier. But
A lot of people, that's the case. Yeah.
to me, I walk away from Blair Witch Project. I'm not, there's nothing about it that it's not like I turn off the lights and like, oh shit. Or I walk outside and the lights flickering, and I'm like, is he coming? Or, something like that. It's, I turn it off. It ends right then and there.
It sounds like we need to start watching the Conjuring movies because they're based on true stories and the people are real and the situations are real. And the demons are real.
That's funny that you said that because my pastor actually told me I should watch after you
Oh,
have
yeah.
been suggesting it to me for years. And
Yeah.
you want to know why he suggested it to me?
Why?
because in the film festival that I've been collaborating with, there's a movie called The Cathedral, and there's a scene where they do where this guy's doing an exorcist. I've never seen an exorcist done before in a film, and I didn't know it was a thing. To be honest with you, I mean, it makes sense. I just didn't know it, and I had so many questions about it, and I was so confused by it, and so many questions. Did I already mention I was confused? Anyway, which is nothing against the people that made that short film's fault, because with a short film it's different. You don't really have that much time. So, but anyway, he was saying that The Conjuring was the most realistic exorcist related movie out there. And that
definitely is.
And that if I had any questions about how an exorcist is done or this or that, I should watch it, because it's, out of any movie, it's the most realistic. It's still itself not 100% realistic, but it's more realistic than...
No, because it's theatrical, dramatic. But it's pretty good. Now, the second one has me asking some questions about how legit it is, okay? Because I'm just going to tell you ahead of time, there are demons possessing other demons and acting like they're the bad, or trying to make them look innocent to make the other people look bad. They're literally scapegoating each other. And I'm like, I'm not sure that's how it works in the real world.
But back to the Blair Witch Project, right? When you watch a movie like this, not even necessarily horror related, just a movie like this, aren't you expecting to go away with something? And what does this movie give you to go away
with? Choose your guides wisely. That's what I go away with.
That's all you got?
and if her name is Heather, run the other way.
I wonder why. Here's what I didn't understand, okay?
And if you hear weird noises, stay in your tent.
Here's my thing I never understood about, and I don't know much about directions, so tell me if I'm wrong. But if they've been going south for 15 hours and they get lost and they're just going, and they realize that they're going in circles, wouldn't it make sense to go north? Why east or west? I mean, if they're going,
they started
south,
going north. They started north.
Right.
That's where the movie was taken. They were going north at first.
Right, but what I'm saying is,
and then they got there, and then they started south to go back.
And they started going south, which is going farther away from the car. If they had started going north, they would have gotten closer to the car, and they'd still be...
that is true if it was a real forest, but the truth is there was a lot more going on to it than that. So even if it didn't matter which direction they went at that point, and they figured that out.
Okay.
Now, what doesn't make sense is if they've been all over these places a million times as they're tracking across the same land, how on earth did they not see the house before? If it's sitting 10 feet away from where most of the movie took place, how did they not see it there?
That's a good question. That's a very good
witchcraft question. Hiding it, magic, witchcraft, wife, it's hiding it, Sure. 10 feet away. Okay. If they're smart enough to realize if they realize that there's a log and they can tell that it's the same log every single time they pass it, and there's a house like 20 feet away from there off hiding in the woods, you tell me they didn't notice that the first few times?
What I don't get, okay, is after the second time of coming across the exact same log with the exact same marks on it, and you could see the exact same footprints up their footprints in it going whatever. Why didn't they then and there the second time of crossing the same log? Guys, we need to figure out a different direction. Instead, you have stupid Heather over here being like, guys, okay, look, I know where we're going, all right? I know we've seen that log already, but I know where we're going. 15 hours later, okay, guys, I think I was wrong yesterday. Yesterday I was lost. I wouldn't admit it. But today I know where we're going, okay? So let's not get the map out, all right? Because I know where I'm going.
Oh my gosh, the map's gone.
But
yeah, it's like a 3-year-old.
But I didn't think you guys were going to use it. I mean, what good's the map?
After just yelling at her ruthlessly 10 minutes before about her losing the map.
I cannot get over
See, I'm beginning to wonder if he improvised him having the map. I'm beginning to wonder if that was his, like, artistic take on it.
Which, I'm sorry, but it wasn't the best artistic take. 10 minutes earlier, you were down her throat about
it made me think of that, what was it, Dora the Explorer singing about the I'm the Map or something, or was that a different show?
That was Dora the Explorer.
If there's a place you gotta go, I'm the one you need to know. I'm the map. I'm the map. I'm the map. If there's a place you gotta get, I can get you there, I bet. I'm the map. 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 I'm the map.
That's all was going through my head.
You know what's funny?
Just imagine the map running itself. The map wanted to escape the drama, so it left by itself.
What I think is funny is Scooby-Doo made a parody of this. And I'm honestly I would have more faith in Scooby-Doo. I kind of want to see what they did.
This was supposed to be just another mystery in the woods.
Have you heard these woods are haunted?
You kids stay away! Those woods are cursed! I never go near them!
Like I bet she never goes near a dentist either.
We were cocky. Why shouldn't we be?
Don't forget, it's my turn to pull off the mask.
But then we got lost. In over our heads.
Wait a minute, I found a clue. Footprints.
No!
Those are our footprints. Those are our footprints.
Was the curse real?
Will someone go out there for a Scooby snack? Somebody! Anybody!
Maybe this time we shouldn't have meddled. We shouldn't have meddled.
It's called the Scooby-Doo Project. I want to watch it, man. So it's the Blair Witch Project parody, the Scooby-Doo version.
They should have called this movie the Bland Witch Project. It's literally just kids running down the road screaming because they see some twigs and some rocks. That's all it is.
But earlier you said that you kind of liked it. So do you like it?
I did. I didn't like those things. I liked the atmosphere, like I said, and I liked how the characters reacted with each other and how raw their emotion was.
Yeah, but wasn't that a problem too? I mean, like we talked about earlier, them always being angry. I mean, you gotta have a give and take. You can't.
I mean, I enjoyed just seeing how well they showed that anger. I was enjoying every single conversation they had because of how raw it was.
But
because most people don't dare. And I enjoyed that. I can't help.
My problem with it, okay, was their anger got to the point for me that why are they still together? You know, like, I mean, I'm pissed off with Heather.
Dan Wolf doesn't surprise.
I'm pissed off with Heather.
Yeah.
I'm gonna walk away and figure it out myself. I mean, that would be my thought. You know, if I was in the situation.
You would think so, but when you're out in the middle of the woods in the dark, you would rather be with anyone than be alone.
But what about in the daytime? The only bad things happen at night, not in the daytime.
Yeah, see, the truth is, Josh never died. He just got sick and tired of her, so he left, and he's hot. That's how they found the tape.
Way to go, Josh. Woo-hoo. 2 minutes left. So overall, I mean, how did you feel when you were watching this movie? How do you feel like you reacted through these characters?
This face.
That face.
It's like, I'm not so sure about this.
You know, it's funny because I feel like more and more we talk about it, it's like I like it even less and less.
You know, and I have to say, I'm guilty of saying the same thing. Like, the more we talk about it, the more problems I see. But you know, that happens with lots of movies.
I know. I mean, even my favorites movies, I know that they're flawed, but I have a reason why they're my favorite. Like, but I guess what I was getting at is
back to the Blair Witch.
Oh, The Negotiator.
Yeah,
One of my
and this
favorite
one's definitely
films.
not one of those. I mean, Bob up there has to agree.
Hey, Bob.
We have to talk.
Bob, what did you think about the Blair Witch? Bob, that's a nasty attitude to have, okay? What did you think about it? That Bob up there's always been an ass. I'm sorry, folks, for anything mean that Bob has said.
He never has anything to say.
Everything he says is filled with such profanity. Like, come on.
All he wanted to do is have some time with Heather. That's all he could think.
Bob, you need to read your Bible and have some clean thoughts. You know, you need to have a pure heart. I'll be praying for you tonight, Bob.
Well, I don't think Bob agrees. But anyway. Yeah.
I'm starting to think that people that are going to watch this are probably going to think like we're high or something.
I have two individuals. I have two in my shot other than myself. See, there's Bob, and there's me, and there's the old hobo back there.
Go back to Bob.
And then there's Ellie.
Bob's got a better looking face.
Yeah, than the hobo or me. Actually,
I thought
Bob
you were
looks
the
majestic.
hobo.
No, I'm not a hobo. I have a house. See, I'm in one.
Oh, I thought that was a set behind you. I thought it was all props set. I didn't know that was
now,
real.
Do you really think these stars and moons are a prop?
I think it's all an imagination. I don't think it's real.
Absolutely not. Okay, fine. You got me. It's all fake. I'm actually out in the middle of the street.
Yeah, you know that I kept hearing that airplanes going over you, and it's like, I can't believe he thinks that I actually believe this is big.
Well, back to the Blair Witch Project once again. In a lot of ways, it has my respect, but not my interest.
But you, of someone who is very much set in environments, you really liked the way this environment was. And that says a lot. That's almost a compliment coming from you, because you're a man that is very much so into environment. So what about the environment did you find so strong and you liked so much?
Because it was the only thing in the film that had any potential in scaring anybody. It was the only thing that could cause any kind of fear. Like when it was dark and the camera looked out into the night and you were seeing all the branches lit up, you're wondering what was just behind the limbs. You wondered what was just behind those trees. You know, that was one of the strongest points of it, is what you couldn't see, but the stuff you could see kind of played into it a little bit. It was the only thing that caused me to wonder,
I would say if all of the jump scares happened when you couldn't see anything, I don't know. I mean, part of me thinks that it would have been scarier, but the other part of me would think like, nah, I don't buy it. So
I don't even remember jump scares.
No, in this film there wasn't any, but it either we see something on the screen or it's all black, and it didn't do all one or the other. And I'm curious if it
kind of
had
mixed it up.
Which in theory sounds like a good idea. But do you think it would have messed it up if it stayed all black?
I think that them going back and forth between the two is actually important, because you were getting to see the difference in between what film they were wanting to make and what was actually happening. Everything in black and white was what they were shooting as their film, and the rest of it was just like, you know, extras.
And Heather was the strongest character. I did feel like it showed her self-centeredness really well, because it's like what people say is, if you're going to do something to others, they should be able to do that to you, right? Like, I shouldn't slap you in the face unless I'm okay with you slapping me in the face, unless you did something to deserve a slap in the face. And whenever she's filming, she's wanting to film when Mike is at his worst moment. Capture that on camera.
Both of them. Yeah, both of them. She did both of them.
Yeah. Well, Josh stopped her that one scene with Mike.
Yeah.
She had an earful of it. She didn't want to listen to him. And then, not that much later, she has her moment. Both of the guys are giving her a hard time and filming her. And she gets so mad. And it kind of...
and upset.
And throws attention.
Yeah. They did a good job showing that with her. She was the best part and the worst part at the same time. Because those poor guys would have been fine if it weren't for following her out to the woods.
Yeah, but you would have thought that at a certain point, you know, I honestly would not have spent 15 hours walking if the day before we got lost and she didn't even tell me that we were lost. I find that out today, but I still spent 15 hours walking with her, and every hour she's saying, we just got 2 more hours, She's got 2 more hours. It's hard for me to get past that. Like, how am I supposed to ignore that part of the film?
Well, the characters weren't ignoring it either.
Yeah, but it just seemed very stupid.
Well, that's kind of the point, really.
The point to have these stupid characters or what?
Well, no, the point that what they're trying to do with her was just like, she was trying to keep optimism up by lying about her not knowing where she was going, because if she wasn't telling them and kept them reassured, they'd just keep going where she wanted. So she kept telling them 2 more hours, even though she had no idea, because she could keep them moving that way.
But she was more concerned with her film project than she ever was to get Mike out of the force so he could come back to his 9-to-5 job.
Yeah, exactly. She was more concerned about the film, and she was so concerned about the film it got them all killed. And there's even more hypocrisy, because you remember Mike talking about how he lost the map or whatever, and then she was like, "Don't you dare say sorry. You don't have the right to say sorry." And then think about all the things that she did wrong, and then she's sitting there on the camera crying like, "Oh, I'm so sorry," like 20 minutes later. Like, you don't have the right to be sorry either.
Yeah, that's true. So,
but that's just college age people. Young adult.
A stupid young adult.
Yep.
What did you think about I honestly thought the beginning of the movie seemed like it was actually going to go somewhere when you're interviewing these people.
Yeah, I know, right? It was so interesting. And then it just dropped.
That happens a lot with these horror movies. I mean,
see, here was myself, and I knew it wasn't going to happen. Okay, I knew it wasn't. But part of me was hoping that the girl was actually associated with the actual Blair Witch, and she was just taking the guys out there to have them sacrificed.
See, now that,
but I knew
that sounds like Cabin in the Woods to me.
Yeah, I mean, but yeah, it's similar to that for sure. Which Cabin in the Woods are we talking about? The new one or
the new one? To people listening, you're probably wondering why I keep comparing this film to Cabin in the Woods. For a little backstory, for most and a majority of me and Cole's friendship, I would never watch a horror-related movie, regardless of what it was, regardless of what it's about. The Cabin in the Woods was the very first horror movie I had ever watched. And then, because of it, I was turned off from horror movies, which I already was. But because of it, I was turned off even more. And then Cole started getting me into Blumhouse. And to this day, if I watch a horror film that's not made by Blumhouse, most of the time I don't enjoy it.
It's true. Me either. I mean, there are exceptions, but very few. And the ones that are exceptions are just like the Blumhouse movies.
But that is why I keep bringing up The Cabin in the Woods, because that was the first horror movie I'd ever watched. And back to The Cabin in the Woods, I did feel like, unlike the Blair Witch Project, and The Cabin in the Woods does that exact thing.
Mm-hmm.
And
you'd be surprised how many horror movies do that. One of the main characters is leading the others to their doom. Think about Truth or Dare. It does that too.
So does Get Out.
So does Get Out. There's lots of horror movies that follow that pattern.
But something we both agree on is a movie it's impossible for a movie to be original just because of its story. I mean, you said yourself,
It takes a lot.
There's so many movies already made that we don't even know about. And then there's so many movies that we do know about. You know, I could come up with the best idea ever. But you know what? I stole that idea from 3, 4, 5 different movies already made. Or not stole, but was inspired because
yeah.
So maybe this specific movie that I say I made hadn't been made before, but those 4 or 5 movies had already been made. So whenever I create the said movie, I'm not adding anything new as far as a movie goes, as far as story goes, except these characters and their story. And so whenever I watch a movie, unless it's a Christmas film, which I already said because it's cheesy, that's what I'm looking for. And that was what has so much problems with the Blair Witch.
Yeah, and I agree. There's a movie with what's his name? John Cusack called Blood Money. And it's a similar setup to the Blair Witch because you have 2 guys and 1 girl. But the thing is the girl is dating one of the guys, and the other guy's been completely in love with her his whole life. So they already have this dynamic that this movie never accomplished. And the girl is happy to use both to get what she needs.
And I will say this. I honestly believe that the Blair Witch Project was a bad movie that got very lucky and blessed because it was marketed so well. Because you think about it, Avatar, bad movie, except for the CGI. CGI is what made it so great. And then Blair Witch Project, like we talked about before, it is so...
Most horror movies
are
on a low budget, and they return a lot more.
Okay.
Most horror movies are low budget films in comparison to what they make back.
Most horror movies are?
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously the Blumhouse ones that are higher budget, but they still return a lot more. But most horror movies make more money just because they're horror movies most of the time. It's crazy. Even the ones that get awful reviews, they don't tend, I mean, they might be a flop in comparison to the action movie or the romance that came out because it didn't make much, but it still makes more than they put into it most of the time.
Right. I did read somewhere that, like, if all the genres, horror genre is number 1 in getting its money back. And then Westerns is at the very end of the list, the last one, because Westerns have pretty much died off. So what did you think overall of the soundtrack in this film? Music is a very vital part of telling a story, of making a movie. So what do you think about it for this film?
Well, there wasn't enough music, Terry. There was hardly any during most of the suspenseful parts. And a lot of it could have been elevated by more music. There wasn't near enough, and it was quite disappointing to me. Because a lot of horror movies nowadays have it.
If it had done music, it probably would have been scarier and more fearful. Had they just added
it would have been a better movie. I mean, think about it. Out of all the big iconic films, how many of them don't have a great soundtrack to go along with it?
Not very many. I mean,
I can't think of a
yeah.
single one.
Right.
I can't think of one. I just can't.
I can't either, but something I'm thinking about right now is I was interviewing this guy who made this film for the film festival, and he had gone to a John Williams concert, which I was completely jealous of. Yeah, that'd be pretty cool.
I've been to one of those too, man.
When did you go to John Williams?
Oh, it was years ago. I was like 12.
Okay, so it was before we were friends, so I forgive you then. Anyway,
Yeah, it was before.
he was telling me about him being at a John Williams concert in 2008 when the new Indiana Jones movie had come out. And Steven Spielberg was there to play a scene of Indiana Jones. And what they did was they had played the same scene with and without music. And without music, the scene was nothing. And then with music, it made a difference. And I had never, we've talked about this before, but I never realized the importance of the music in film until you and I had watched Mom and Dad. That movie taught me the importance of.
Oh yeah, that was so But it was so in conflict with itself.
Right, but before that movie, you have to watch a really bad movie before you can truly appreciate something that's done right. There's that one screenwriter that I really admire. Can't remember exactly who it was. I want to say John Hughes, but I could be thinking of someone else. But they had said something about it's more important to watch the bad movies and think of what made them bad and write something to make it better than it is to watch a good movie. Because if you watch a good movie, you're already hooked. You're not going to be thinking about what can be better.
I can definitely agree with that. I mean, I know you don't like to rate movies because you can't really possibly rate all the detail and effort that went into it. But for me personally, Blair Witch is between a 4 and a 5.
Yeah, and that's another thing. Is like it's hard
out of 10
to be specific. Yeah, it's hard for me to rate a movie because there's so much that goes involved in making a film, and it's like, before I had started having these filmmakers and actors on my show, I would have been happy to rate a movie. I would have just needed to understand a system. For so long, I'd watch these YouTube videos of this guy, Chris Stockman, and other people that I really like give a movie a 8.5 out of 10, 4.5 out of 10, or whatever. And I couldn't understand that because it's like I didn't understand their way of grading it. I tried creating my own way of grading it, and it just didn't make sense to me. I didn't understand how they came with that number. CinemaSins is the only one I've actually watched, and I still watch, that explains their rating as they're doing the video. But it's like, as they're explaining to me, I still think it's kind of stupid. But not just that, but it's like, I just feel like it's so disrespectful to the people involved in the film. Because you're taking something.
I mean, there's
what?
I mean, constructive criticism is important. Even people who spend a great deal of time doing something good, they still need to know what could have been improved and what was good.
That is
and
true.
A number system is just another way. It's just a way of giving that information. Like my enjoyment level from 1 to 10 comes from immersion and characters and story. And a mix of those things creates my rating system out of enjoyment, 1 out of 10 or whatever, 0, whatever it is. And I don't feel like it's disrespectful because I'm not disrespecting them with my number. It's kind of like, okay, I'm not going to give them a rating, but I'm going to say their movie's trash. Is that any more respectful than saying 3 out of 10 or 8 out of 10? I mean, you can still talk about something disrespectfully, even if you don't give it a number.
Yeah, that's true. And
you can be respectful with a number, but if you don't understand the metrics, I mean, everyone has a different mind. Yours might be as simple as, is it worth watching or not?
I guess that's kind of how I guess whenever I watch a movie, that's how I think of it. It's like worth watching or not. My opinion. I guess if I was to rate it, it'd be a thumbs up or thumbs down. If I was to rate it, because still my mind can't comprehend a whatever out of 10 system. It just can't do it.
It's either good or bad. It's worth it or it's not worth it.
And for my personal opinion, and I mean no disrespect to the people involved, but I'd have to give it a thumbs down if I was to.
Well, and if you think about my 4 or 5 out of 10, that means it's a fail. It's just that it had a couple good things that it did, even though it's still a thumbs down. That's why it's 4 or 5. Is it because it's not completely terrible? It's not. It did some good things that I don't think I could have accomplished with the first film.
And that's the thing is, first films are going to be the messiest. I'm going to try to do a short film this Christmas, and I'm so thankful to have people helping me with it, but it's probably going to be the worst film I ever make, regardless of how good the writing is, how good everything else is. It's probably going to be the worst, or it should be the worst film I ever make. Every film I make after that should be better. At least that's the way I look at it.
Yep. We're already down to 4 minutes again.
All right. Anything else you'd like to say?
Well, I think that something that we didn't really cover about it is, we know it's fictional, right? But did it give you the sense that something parallel to that somewhere else could possibly exist in that? Did it create any sort of realism for you at all?
Not for me. That's why I had such a hard time watching it, because it's like, for me, it's like watching Glass all over again. What I mean by that is M. Night Shyamalan was creating the Unbreakable trilogy, and they were advertised to be movies that stand on its own. But in reality, that's impossible to do. And that's the reason why Glass failed, was you cannot create a movie that stand on its own in the same saga. That's retarded. That's like making Star Wars Episode 3 Revenge of the Sith, but it has nothing to do with clones.
I think books do a better job at that. And there were some older TV shows that would do that. How each episode was about a singular story that you didn't have to see in order from the last one. But if you did see them in order, you could appreciate them slightly a little bit more, because you have seen the progression of the characters overall a little bit.
That is the reason why How I Met Your Mother was, and for the longest time, probably still is, my favorite sitcom. because unlike most sitcoms, that's exactly what it does. I mean, Friends does it a little bit too, but not to the extent that How I Met Your Mother does. And How I Met Your Mother, what happens in one episode, it's still taking a ripple effect in the next one. Next one. In 3 episodes, Ted's hinting at something that's going to be happening 3 seasons from now. And one season, there's 5 episodes counting down a major event that's going to happen towards the end of the season. Like, what other sitcom is out there that's like that? It's unique for that
But you
reason.
could still, and even if you watch them out of order, you could still appreciate them for what they are. An episode can still stand on its own, right?
I mean, I guess so, but
It's not the same.
No, and just because you do it for a show, I don't think it works for a movie.
Yeah, I agree. No, and there are some movies that kind of do that. If you think about it, the Mission Impossible movies, they're not a great example of amazing storytelling, but you can watch them in any order.
Yeah. So, what did you think about the end of the film? I didn't feel like we really touched very much on the end of the film.
Okay, so part of me thought it was kind of cool how they had him, one of them, what was it, Mike facing in the corner, and then she was taken out behind him, kind of like they described at the beginning about the children. I thought that was cool. But besides that, I mean, okay, cool. They're going after their friend who they know is dead already, and they know it's not him because they already expressed it before. And they wander in the house and they die for it. The end. What a wonderful ending. No, I didn't buy it. Let's just go into this magical house with red prints everywhere and, all this creepy stuff. Yes, let's go in there because we're sure our friend is in there alive because he's screaming and not responding to us. Even though we heard him before and was convinced it wasn't him, but we changed our mind.
The thing I don't get is people believe that this movie was real, right? So if this movie was real, if everything that happened in this movie was real, let's say, then why was it that not until this movie was ready to come out, anybody had even heard of the Blair Witch Project? I mean, something like this, you would have heard it decades. I mean, the myths, the stories went all the way back to the 1940s, 1950s. If this thing was legit, my mom probably would have heard stories of it because she grew up in Massachusetts, which isn't too far from Maryland. Or, if not her, there'd be a blog. There'd be a blog someone started. Somebody would have been friends with somebody. Why didn't people ask those questions? Or if this movie was real, how the hell did somebody come across this footage in that house? Because if Heather and Mike died in that house, and this at the beginning of the film, it says that the footage was found a year later. Who went in that house to find that footage and didn't get killed? How did they go to that house without getting lost in the woods if these characters had to be lost to find that house?
Mm-hmm.
That's what I don't get.
Well, we don't really know what happens afterwards. So, for all we know, they could have sent a search party out and like a whole team of SWAT people came in with their guns and maybe Bush would stand the team.
Yeah, but
we don't really know.
If what happened to them happened to them, then would that be saying that the Blair Witch is real? Or is it still a myth and it's just someone else and they're just at the wrong place at the wrong time?
I honestly don't think that they thought too much about how it would be perceived. They figured that if they just said this was real to someone, that they would just believe it and not question it.
And then that's
A
just
lot of people just be like, oh, I believe that, and never look up.
that that there's got to be a limit to that, right? I mean, George Lucas couldn't come on a TV in 1985 and say Star Wars, guys, Star Wars is real.
Once again, we're comparing this a lot to big people. We're still talking about people doing their project for a student film here. We're talking about something different than a big feature film that requires all this. I mean, if I was going to make a film for Sundance, I'm not super duper worried about whether people are going to believe it or not. I'll try to make them believe it just, because it's fun, but I'm not going to think through it that much.
But why not? I mean, Sundance is like on top of the line of one of the most prestigious film festivals if you were to submit in film.
Because for me personally, it would have been more about making them believe the characters, not trying to convince them that all this stuff actually happened. I mean, I'm in a different place than they are, and I don't feel like they accomplished that either. So, but they obviously accomplished something, or else they wouldn't have got the success they did.
And you're right about that. I can't say you're wrong, but it's just like the ending was kind of cool, kind of weird, confusing, but cool. I liked that part of it. But it's like you think about it from the start of the film to the end of the film. How do we go from A to Z and not come across B, C, and D on the way?
And I just thought of something. So what if the Blair Witch wanted someone to find the footage? So that way they could draw in more people.
But if the Blair Witch is supposed to be some entity, it wouldn't care about people, right?
It obviously likes drawing people in. It did it before. Why not again? I mean, you saw all the hand prints and stuff. That was from all sorts of different people that have been there before.
Oh, you talking about on the walls?
Yeah.
I do have to say, it almost looked me, and I'm sorry to anyone this may offend, but it almost looked like a little kid was paid to put handprints on the wall.
Yeah, it's probably what it was. But either way, it still symbolized the fact that people have been there.
Yeah. Well, I know this has nothing to do with our review, but I just wanted to add this just because it's a fun fact. I don't understand how Bruce Willis could have predicted the success of this movie.
Yeah, I remember you telling me about that before we got on here.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting. Bruce Willis was on a set of Pulp Fiction, and somehow he found out about the Blair Witch Project. I guess a lot of people knew about it. A lot of celebrities, a lot of people knew about it, and they were on the hush-hush side of it because they knew it was baloney. But whatever reason, he predicted that it would be successful. Which, the thing I find so fascinating is Blair Witch Project came out same year as Sixth Sense. And it's mind-boggling to me to think that people were willing to pay more or double the money to see this instead of The Sixth Sense. I mean, maybe obviously just because it was out in the same year doesn't mean it was showing at the same time. But you think about it, and that's what I think of in my head. Just, I think of Blair Witch and The Sixth Sense in the same theater at the same time. That's probably not the way it happened. But had that been the way it happened, like, what? How does that make any sense? I don't get it. The Sixth Sense is like, has everything that this movie doesn't. Maybe we need to review The Sixth Sense. Is there anything you'd like to add?
I think that we pretty much covered it. So yeah, good.
All right. Well,
thanks for having me.
Glad to have you on, buddy. It's an honor. You gonna leave me hanging like that? What's wrong with you?
I'm trying.
Well, you need to come and skip work tomorrow and come to Eureka so you can give me a proper handshake.
I don't have work tomorrow.
Okay, well then I guess you'd have to ditch your girlfriend, the fiance, to give me a proper handshake.
I'd rather not.
Oh. Hey, for the people listening who may be a fan of you or like what they heard on the show or want to hear your Jack Sparrow accent, share your lights. Where can they find you?
Those things. What he said.
All right, guys and pigs. I'll put it in the description.
Yep.